Hello, dear friends. Welcome to our workshop about child-parent relationships, day 1. Welcome to everyone who is watching us live or the people who will watch the recording later. So I hope that everything is okay with the sound and with the picture. First of all, let me share with you what we are going to cover during those 2-day workshop. So basically, the topics that we have are, first of all, the 4 astrological elements and how they affect the psychological type of the person, how they define his temper. Also, we are going to talk about different element combinations in the person's horoscopes, in the child's horoscope. And after that, we are going to talk about child-parent relationships depending on the different element combinations. Then the other stuff that we are going to talk about are the sign of the moon, the different signs of the moon, of course, and the emotional needs of the child and the person in general. Also, the different aspects of the moon with the other planets and how they affect the emotional needs, how they affect the psychological type. And after that, I will share with you a very interesting approach about how you can fulfill the emotional needs of your child. And it's not only about children. Generally, you will understand how basically you can express your feelings in a way that the other person or your child will feel loved. And we are going to talk about the astrological indications which can show the right way for this expression. So we have many things to talk about, many things to cover. It will be intense. I highly recommend you to take some notes in a notebook or wherever you want. Write those things down because there will be lots of information and you may want to come back later and remind yourself. Of course, the video will always be available for you whenever you want to. And I think that what's really important for this workshop is to learn how to approach the general interpretation. Of course, it can be extremely helpful for parents because they will understand, how they can support their child or what might be the possible issues within their relationship. But I think that generally everyone can benefit from this workshop because basically we are going to talk about human's nature and psychology and how astrology supports us in this path. So even if you're not a parent, I know that we have people who are not parents, but they can still benefit because they can understand themselves and astrology better, especially if you would like to interpret charts for other people. This will be extremely valuable for you because that's the basics of astrology and how you interpret the chart. I will show you the general approach and from where you should start your analysis. And one advice I have for you in general is always start with the most important stuff. I mean, with the main idea or the fundamentals of the chart. And after that, you can add different layers and include, for example, aspects between planets, positions of planets in signs. They are also important, of course, but always start with analysis of the astrological elements in the chart. It will give you incredible information for the person and his psychological type and his temper. So, of course, we are focusing also on the child-parent relationships. That's our main topic. And actually, I would like to begin with a couple of indications which may show you that there is a karmic relationship between the parent and the child. So here are some of them, and if you find 1, 2, or even more indications of those, it means that the connection between the parent and the child is very, very strong. And one of the main reasons why I decided to make this workshop is because many people struggle with understanding their children. And those relationships can be tough. And the most difficult is that basically you cannot give up, or at least most of us can't give up from our children or from our parents. So they are what they are, and we have to learn to improve the relationship or understand each other better. And it's not like, you're having a partner and things don't work and you can just, get divorced or separate. When we talk about children and parents, the relationship is stronger and it's more difficult for us. So this can be one of the great lessons for many, many people, the relationship with their parents and their children. So let's start with those indications which show that there is a strong karmic connection between the parent and the child. So the first one is repeating aspects between the same planets. I have given this example a couple of times, but if you don't know it, I will share it again. As an example, my father has a square between Uranus and the moon. I have the same aspect, Uranus squaring the moon, and my daughter has the same aspect as well. Uranus squares the moon. Those type of repeating aspects between the generations, especially if you find them in 3 generations, this is a strong indication that there is a karmic connection between the parent and the child. And in one of the cases, it might be like in our case, the aspect is exactly the same. There is a square between the same 2 planets. In other cases, you may notice that, for example, you have a square, let's say, between the Sun and Jupiter in your chart, but your child has a trine between the Sun and Jupiter. So you may have the challenging aspect, the child has the positive aspect. This is an indication that the parent has worked with this topic and in some way has already put some kind of efforts in this area. So he has channeled this energy and he has, improved this type of energy. So this is a very good indication. We may have also the opposite case. Let's say that you have a trine between the Sun and Jupiter, and your child has opposition between the Sun and Jupiter. In this case, we can assume that the parent has this potential of the positive aspect, but he hasn't used it in a correct way. There is something, whether the parent has neglected the impact or the talent or the skills of this aspect, or he has used it in a way which is not positive. So these are always very interesting connections that we can observe. So that's one thing that we pay attention. Let's see. Another thing is if you have aspects between the Sun, the Moon, and Saturn. These are also indications that there is some kind of connection between our parents and us. The moon is a symbol of the mother, as we know, and the Sun and Saturn can both represent the father. So this type of connections are also considered to be karmic within the chart of the person, within the chart of the child, let's say. Okay, another indication is if you have many planets in 4th, 8th, and 12th house, the water houses. They are also considered to be more karmic, in some way related to the past. So if you have many planets in those houses, especially if your child or your parent has the same thing as well, this is an indication for a karmic connection as well. The next thing, the next indication is if you have intercepted signs. the same intercepted signs. Let's say that you have intercepted Taurus and Scorpio in your horoscope, and your parent or child has the same axis, the same sign axis intercepted as well. This is an indication that you both have to learn to work or to improve how you process this energy, the energy of those signs which are intercepted. And the other case is if you have any signs intercepted in the same houses. So let's say you both have some signs which are intercepted in, for example, 4th and 10th house. This is also an indication that you both have to work or to put some efforts in those concrete life areas which are represented by the houses where you have the interceptions. The next indication, which also is related to karmic connections, is if you both have the same planets which are intercepted. Let's say you both have an intercepted Venus or intercepted Saturn in the charts. This is also an indication that there is a repeating pattern and something needs to, to be unlocked for you and for your child as well. Another thing which is also considered to be important is if you are born on a new moon or eclipse, solar or lunar eclipse. This is a very, very strong indication, especially the eclipses. They bring very strong connection between the parents. Usually there can be some kind of challenge, some kind of difficulty related as well, but the connection is very karmic and very strong. And the other thing which is also considered to be karmic is if you have your sun, moon, or ascendant sign in the last 3 degrees of certain sign, of any sign. The last 3 degrees of each sign are considered to be critical. They are more specific. And if you have your sun, ascendant, or moon in the last 3 degrees, for example, I have mine, this is also an indication that there is a specific connection which goes within the family. Okay, so these are some of the most important indications for those karmic relationships. So basically the main idea is to search for repeating patterns in the charts. Strong elements in the same charts, in the two charts, or missing elements in the two charts, or aspects between the same planet, or even planets in the same degrees but in different signs can also represent some kind of connection. As we said, interceptions, intercepted houses or intercepted signs in the two charts are also important. So next we can move to description of the 4 elements. And this is always the starting point. Whenever I analyze someone's horoscope, I always start with the general analysis of the birth chart, of specifically the astrological elements. As we know in astrology, we have 4 elements: fire, earth, air, and water. And all of them are related to the different tempers, psychological tempers. Basically, this is a theory which is described by Carl Gustav Jung, a great psychologist who, by the way, has also been an astrologer. And he has worked a lot on those psychological types. And basically, he makes this connection between the elements and the psychological tempers. The first classification of the elements, by the way, is related to their polarity. We have negative and positive polarities, or male and female polarities. The fire and the air signs are considered to be active or male polarity signs, or also called positive. And when we say positive, it doesn't mean good. It means, like, the polarities, we always have something positive and something negative, like the battery. So it's not like bad or good. So the fire and air signs are male polarity signs, and water and earth are passive or female signs or negative signs. Also, Jung describes the 4 psychological types: choleric type, melancholic type, phlegmatic, and sanguine. These are the 4 psychological types described by him, and they are, of course, represented by the 4 elements. So we are going to talk about each of the elements and basically how it affects your child. Now, again, I repeat, the focus is on children, but this applies to everyone, not only children. But the difference is that when we talk about a child, everything is usually much more obvious. Children don't have this mask that we as grown-ups, put on our faces or on our behavior. They're more natural. So usually things are more obvious for children. And especially the dominant element. Dominant element means the sign in which you have the biggest amount of planets. This is the dominant element, which of course is the most important in this case. And for children, this is very obvious. There might be some exceptions. So we are going to talk about, first of all, the 4 elements. And then we are going to talk about how certain elements might be affected depending on planetary influences. So in some cases, there might be some exceptions, and some planets may change a little bit the expression, but the essence is still there. So it's always important to start from this. So the first element which we are going to describe is the fire element, or the choleric temper described by Jung. So these are usually very active children and people. They are very confident. They need to do something. They take initiatives. They are not so afraid. They can be great leaders. And if the fire element is really strong, sometimes it might be difficult for them to follow orders. And sometimes parents may have challenges with those children. For example, if they want different things. Usually it's difficult to convince the child with the strong fire element in the chart. He knows what he wants and he's not willing to make compromises. Usually they're not good with making compromises. So also they react very strongly if you don't want to do something for them, or let's say you don't want to buy them something. Their reaction can be very strong. Usually they're very passionate, they're very expressive, and sometimes they might be impatient. Sometimes they might become aggressive. Of course, we have to find other confirmations for this, but this is an option. Sometimes they can be more aggressive. Okay, let's see. Yeah, they are also very independent in most of the cases. And when they grow up, usually they find their path on their own. Usually they don't need the parent to, navigate them or to guide them when it comes to choosing a career or life direction. Usually they know what they want and they just go for it. That's the most typical case. Okay. Sometimes a challenge for the fire element might be to be empathetic. Usually those children are not very good when it comes to, being kind. They might be too direct and on the point. So sometimes they might hurt others, not intentionally. It's just that, they're brutally honest or very direct when they are expressing their desires and their needs. And they need to be the leaders. It's what makes them happy. They need to be active. For those children, it's especially good if you find some kind of sports activities. They they can be very productive and very ambitious. Usually those children are also more ambitious. Okay, so as we said, this is the choleric temper, psychological type according to Jung. Okay, next we have the air element. The air is first of all, a male polarity sign, active or extroverted sign. So is the fire, by the way, they are extroverted. And with the air element, those children, they need more variety. That's very typical for them. They need more variety. Usually they're easygoing. You can communicate with them, you can negotiate with them, they're paying attention, they're listening. They're one of those children when when you're in a room and it looks like the child is playing at the corner doing something on their own, but he still listens and knows what the parents are doing and what they're talking about, even if it looks like he doesn't pay attention. Those children, they can just react and respond very well to the outer circumstances. This is the sanguine not archetype, temper, the sanguine temper according to Jung's classification. And usually these are the easiest kids in most of the cases, not always, but in most of the cases. They need variety. A challenge for them might be that they may not have a clear focus on one direction. They may start many things and they are not always completing them. So this might be kind of a challenge. We are going to talk about in a little bit which planets can help in this situation. But generally, this is a challenge for the air element. And sometimes they may promise things which they don't complete. So they promise something, but they do something else. Okay. So they are changing frequently, usually. They may have, often changes in their moods. And this can be actually positive because they can switch from, for example, being angry to being cheerful really fast. Usually they don't keep the bad memories for too long. Okay, so they are friendly, as we said. They are adaptable. This is also something very, very positive. They are adaptable. For example, the fire element is not so adaptable. The earth element is also not so adaptable, but air and water are more adaptable signs. And something typical is that, for example, if you forbid something, they may say, okay, I will not do that. And after that, they just do what they want. So usually they don't confront directly. For example, the fire element, the fire child will confront you directly, and he may scream, and he can make some of those scenes in some cases. The air child usually is smarter, if we can say so. So he's trying to negotiate, he's trying to please you. Usually air children, they are more like a pleasers for others. It's important for them. They don't like drama. The air element is all about lightness. So they don't like too much drama or confrontations or arguing. They want things to be smooth and, to do their own stuff, to have variety. Information is usually very important for them. Those children can be very curious. Usually they can have a good memory because they're interested in many things. The challenge is that sometimes they might be superficial. So they don't get too deep into something. They learn something here and something there, and they want to communicate with this person a little bit, after that with the other one. So they don't stay focused for long period on something, unless there are other indications, of course. Okay, when it comes to finding their career direction, usually it's not a challenge for those children when they grow up, but also they may change their direction, and it happens in an easy way. So there is not much drama again, and it's not difficult for them to adapt to a change. For example, they try one career and maybe it doesn't work, or maybe it's no longer interesting for them. They can easily switch their focus and their career direction. And curiosity is very important for those children. So the more curious they are about something, the more productive they can be and the better results they will get. Okay. Yeah, one more thing for the air element. Usually they don't have too much energy. Usually those children need to relax more, so physically they are not so strong in most of the cases. Okay, next we have the water element. Water, first of all, is a female polarity sign. This is the phlegmatic sign. There has been a discussion whether the phlegmatic temper should be related to the water or the earth element. But the truth is that phlegmatic or phlegma in Latin means water or fluid, maybe fluid. So there is no, I mean, that's the general conclusion, even though there were some kind of discussion that the phlegmatic temper is related to the water element, not to the earth element. So those children with the strong water element, first of all, they are very sensitive. They are very emotional. You can insult them without realizing them. So parents have to be very careful with those children, and they can remember things for a long time, and it really hurts them deep. Sometimes they might be more passive, they might be shy, they may have their own worries and fears. They're not always open. So those people with the strong water element, they have a very deep inner world. And it's not always easy to get close to them. So water is one of the more complicated elements, in my opinion. Okay, let's see. So we said they are shy, they are very sensitive. Also, they sense very well the family atmosphere. For example, if there are conflicts between the parents, or let's say they might be very sensitive when it comes to the information which gets close to them. I had an example about a child who was extremely traumatized because of listening to bad news on TV regularly, during dinner time. It's just that, the family is sitting together there, eating together, and the parents are just, listening to the TV. Many families are doing this. And because of those bad news on TV constantly, it really suppressed the child. And it takes time before the parents can understand that. It's not, for example, if this is a fire child, he will stand up and he will say, well, I don't like this. I want to listen to something else. Or, it's direct. The water child may keep many, many things for himself. Sometimes they can be suspicious, so they don't trust other people easily, especially if we talk about the Scorpio sign. Especially if Scorpio is the dominant sign, those children can be very suspicious, and it takes time before you can connect with them and make them feel protected. Okay, let's see, what else do we have? Yeah, they're shy, they're sensitive. We already talked about that. They can also be influenced by other people, by the way. For example, the environment, friends, or other influences may have a strong impact on them. So also something to consider if you're a parent of a water child. Okay, and the last element is the earth element. This is the melancholic temper according to Jung's classification. And those children, first of all, yeah, the element is also a female polarity sign. It's passive and introverted, just like the water element. And those children may also be very quiet. They might be very closed. They can be very logical and practical, but also very stubborn. Usually these are the most stubborn children, the children with a very strong earth element. At the same time, they can be very hardworking. So here, if they are really interested in something, they are capable of finishing, whether this is, a book or education or something else. They are more likely to, to stay constant. Sometimes they don't talk a lot. Sometimes they might be quiet and closed and even slow. So they may need more patience when it comes to learning new things, for example, a new language or a new skill, or at school. Or also, it's more difficult for them to adapt to new circumstances. Usually, they don't like changes. They feel very well, they feel very secure if they have a clear, strict schedule. For example, even when they're really small, even when they are a little bit older, they can work very well when they have a clear schedule. Okay. Yeah, also for the earth child, it might be very difficult to admit if he has made a mistake. So be very careful if your child has a very strong earth element. I would say with the water element, it's very close as well. They may take it very personally. So, don't try to show them their mistakes and instead try to encourage them more. Usually, those children need more encouragement. Okay, so these are the basic things about each of the four elements. Now, we are going to talk about which planetary influences may affect this general starting point or information. Now I'm going to talk about strength of planets and what does it mean if one planet is strong and how it can affect the dominant element. Now, here we have to describe actually what does it mean to have a strong planet. And I don't want to dive too deep into that topic because it will take a while. I'm planning on making an additional tutorial about the different strengths of the planet. So I guess that you're subscribed to my channel and you have signed up for my email list. You will get this detailed tutorial about the strengths of the planet. So if you're not completely aware what does it mean to have a strong planet, I will provide that information for you. Now I can just, very briefly, I can share the different strengths so that you know what does it mean to have a strong planet in your horoscope. A strong planet is considered if it's in its own sign, the sign of its rulership. This is called essential strength. The planet can also be strong accidentally or basically according to its house position. Planets which are in the houses which are naturally related to them or ruled by them. So, for example, Mars is the natural ruler of first house, so Mars in first house is strong. Venus is the natural ruler of second house, so Venus in second house is also stronger. So that's one thing. Also, generally speaking, any planet in your first or 10th house becomes stronger as well. And A planet which is in a major aspect with your sun can also be considered to be stronger. And planet in conjunction with your south node. So this is important, not with the north node, with the south node. This is also, I think it was called a draconic strength of the planets. So as I said, I will provide more information on that topic, but for now, just, try to remember this, this information. And when we talk about the fire element, the planets which can increase the strength or the typical qualities of the fire element are the Sun, Mars, and Jupiter, basically the fire planet. So it's quite logical. If your child has a fire dominant element in the chart, and also, let's say, for example, Jupiter is in first house, or Mars is in conjunction with the Sun, it really increases the fire qualities. So strong Sun, Mars, or Jupiter. Also, if the child has a stellium of planets in the fire element, it increases the element as well. If the ascendant is in a fire sign, this energy becomes stronger, or if the ruler of the ascendant is in a fire sign. For example, your child has, let's say, ascendant in Libra and Venus is in Sagittarius, for example. The ruler of the ascendant in fire sign also increases the strength of this element. Now, the planets which can make the fire element softer are, of course, the feminine planets, the Moon, Venus, and Neptune. So let's say that if your child has the Moon in first house, or, for example, Neptune in conjunction with the Sun, or Venus is also in a key position, not necessarily all of those indications, even one of those can increase, actually can soften the strength of the fire element. So it means that, your child will be more sensitive, won't be so tough like typically the fire children are. And yeah, basically you can negotiate easier. Okay, also, of course, water ascendant or the ruler of the ascendant in a water sign can also make the fire element softer. Now, if Saturn or Pluto are strong in the chart, let's say Pluto in conjunction with the Sun or Saturn in first house, it would make the planets stronger. In this case, the fire child can become really, really tough and sometimes difficult. Sometimes those children might be too aggressive or even sometimes cruel, or they really, really want to dominate. They really need to control. So it might be difficult for them to, for example, follow instructions or guidelines from parents or teachers as well. Okay. If the fire child has a strong Mercury or Uranus, it may become more impatient and more nervous. Usually, Mercury and Uranus are related to our nervous system. And generally, children with a strong Mercury or Uranus, they can be more nervous, they need more dynamics. So that's how it would affect the fire child. Another thing which can soften the fire element is if the child has many planets in 4th, 8th, or 12th house. These are the water houses. So it makes the element or the impact softer. And of course, planets in fire houses increase the strength of the fire element. So planets in your first house, in 5th or 9th house, can make the fire element more intense. Okay, and of course, if the south node is in a fire sign, it also increases the strength of this element. Now, let's talk about the air element and how the different planets can affect or change this element. Now, the planets which increase the strength of the air element are Mercury and Uranus. If your child has, let's say, Mercury in first house, or Uranus in conjunction with the Sun, or even Uranus on MC in 10th house, this increases the air element. So the child can be very nervous, the child can be very curious, and might be very good in learning things, but at the same time, it may struggle with consistency or other stuff. Also, if the ascendant is in an air sign or the ruler of the ascendant in an air sign, it increases the strength of the air element. Many planets in third, seventh, or 11th house also make the air element stronger. And planets which can change the air element. If the fire planets are very strong, the Sun, Mars, or Jupiter, the child can become more confident and more independent. So this can be actually a very nice combination. On the other hand, if the water planets are strong, the Moon, Neptune, and Venus, the child can be really soft, really kind. You can negotiate very well with him. Also, the sensitivity can, can be increased, and sometimes those children may not know their direction. I mean, they may need more guidance. They hesitate. They are not so sure what exactly they want. Okay, yeah, and they can dream a lot. This can be, the children which are living in their own world, constantly dreaming and imagining something with very bright imagination. Strong air element with strong water planets. Okay. Now, here is something interesting. As we said, the air element very often struggles with completing the things that it starts. Not always, but because of this, focus on many things, as we said, air children may not complete everything they start. What can be really helpful in this case is if the child has a strong Saturn. The strong Saturn can really make your child more responsible and completing the things that it starts. Also, the strong Saturn in this combination may allow your child to materialize its ideas. So usually that's a very constructive, very productive combination. And if Pluto is strong, when you have a strong air element as well, the child can become braver and may have stronger leader skills, which usually is not typical for the air element, but strong Pluto may balance this or may compensate that. Now, what about the water element? The planets which can increase the strength of the water element are, of course, the water planets, the Moon, Venus, and Neptune. If they are strong, it becomes, really intense. So the child can be oversensitive, over emotional, and, can bring more worries. Sometimes the water children, they have their own worries. Another thing is, of course, the water ascendant or the ruler of the ascendant in a water sign, or the south node in a water sign, or many planets in water houses. 4th, 8th, and 12th house. It also makes things very watery. On the other hand, if the child has a strong fire planets, the Sun, Mars, and Jupiter, together with the strong water element, it can really help with increasing his confidence. Because sometimes water children, they may have challenges with their confidence. They might be shy. But if the fire planets are strong, let's say Mars in first house or Jupiter in conjunction with the Sun, it can really help the child with his confidence, but can also make him very sensitive and can take things too personally. I mean, because the water element still makes the child or the person very sensitive. And on the other hand, the strong water planets can increase his self-esteem. So he may respond very strongly if you don't appreciate him or if you don't respect him. So those children sometimes can be very demanding, and they really, really need to be appreciated and can take everything too personally. Okay, now of course also with strong Mercury and Uranus, the child can become more capricious. If you have a strong water element and also strong Mercury and Uranus, sometimes those children don't know what they want. They may want something, and after that they want something else. So they're switching. They are not aware what exactly is that they want. And if Saturn or Pluto, one of the planets, they don't need to be both strong, but if one of those planets is strong together with the water element, the child can be more confident, can be tougher, but also these planets can increase the worries or the fears of the child. So sometimes those children can be very suspicious and they may have trust issues. So water element with a strong Pluto or Saturn. And finally, we have the earth element. The planets which increase the strength of the earth element are, first of all, of course, Saturn. Saturn is an earth planet, so it definitely increases the importance. But also Pluto. If the child has a strong Pluto, because Pluto has some kind of stubbornness related, or some kind of passion or intense focus. So strong Saturn and Pluto can increase the earth element. Also, ascendant in an earth sign, or the ruler of the ascendant in an earth sign, or planets in earth houses, second, sixth, or 10th house. If the child has many planets there, the earth element becomes very, very strong, and south node in earth signs increases the strength as well. Now, the water planets, the moon, Venus, Neptune, if they are strong, they can make the child more compassionate, more sensitive. And if Mercury is strong, usually it can be very helpful. The child can be, more friendly, can communicate easier, can express himself easier. So usually this is a very nice combination. And if Uranus is strong, it increases the worries of the Earth child. The fire planets, the Sun, Mars, and Jupiter, they really help with the confidence and the self-esteem of your child, together with the strong Earth element. Okay, so we can move now to the different element combinations. Okay, so we have so many other things to talk about that I'm not completely sure that we are going to have enough time today. So I will see how we move, but maybe we are going to need to complete some of the things from today tomorrow. But let's see how we continue, because we have to talk about the different element combinations for the child, because you may have a dominant water element, but you still have the others, and usually there is another one which is also significant. In most of the cases, we have two elements which are strong in the child's horoscope. One usually is dominating. So we are going to talk about that, and also we need to cover the child-parent combination. So let's see how much time we are going to have today. So let's talk about, first of all, fire and air. What does it represent if your child has a dominant fire and air signs? And I think it's logical. What do we mean when we say a dominant element? So basically, the elements which are the most significant for you are the ones in which you have the highest number of planets. So we have 10 planets. We are analyzing all of them. The personal planets may have a little bit more or stronger impact, but we are still analyzing the 10 planets. So if you have dominant fire and air element, or your child, this can be a very good combination because, first of all, they are both male polarity signs. So there is a harmony between those two elements. And the positive thing is that the child may have some great ideas. The air element usually brings great ideas, and the intellectual capacity is stronger. And at the same time, the strong fire element allows the child to take action. So this can be a very productive combination and very action oriented, especially when it comes to some ideas and, taking action about those ideas. Okay. Let's see what else. Yeah, they may have also different goals. Something interesting is that their goals may change with time. This is mostly because of the air element. So they have the need to take action because of the fire, but the air also brings the need for some variety or can bring some kind of superficial attitude. So the child may switch his goals, or even the grown-up person as well. So he starts something and then he wants to start something else. Okay, but usually those children are very extroverted. They are very active and they are very open. So they are, I would say, an easy case. Okay, yeah. Another thing is that usually they don't like to be engaged with other people's problems. They are more focused on their own needs, so they're not so empathetic, and they definitely want to focus more on themselves, mostly because of the fire element. Fire is about the ego, about, what's interesting, what's important for the person himself. So very often those are independent children. They don't bring, they're not so hesitant, or they don't lack confidence. Now, the next element combination that we have is between fire and water. If your child or you or someone else have dominant fire and water element, first of all, there is some kind of contradiction here. And the psychological type is not so easygoing. Fire element is active sign, active element, it's a male polarity sign, and the water, on the other hand, is passive and introverted and closed. So there are different polarities which are pulling the person in two directions. So part of him wants to express himself openly, and the other part wants to keep certain level of privacy. But usually those children and those people are very passionate. Emotions are very important. Their actions are influenced by their emotions very often. They might be sometimes drama queens. Actually, this can be, the typical drama queen combination, because both of the elements are emotional, of course, in a different way. The water is emotional on an inner level. It's sensitive. It has those inner experiences. The fire is about, showing those things, expressing them. So very often I describe this combination as a boiling water. So imagine like you have a water, for example, like you're trying to cook a soup, or when you're bringing some kind of heat to the water, it starts boiling. So this is what this combination may look like, and it might be very dynamic, and sometimes those children and those people may explode. They're controlling themselves until a certain point, and sometimes they just explode with so much emotions and strong reactions. So sometimes they are not so easy. Okay, let's see. They take things too personally very often, and they really care about how much they are appreciated by others. And their moods are also affecting their behavior and their reactions and their relationships. So definitely this is one of the interesting combinations, even if it might be challenging sometimes. Now the next combination that we have is fire and earth. Let's say that your child has, for example, 4 planets in fire signs and 3 planets in earth signs, for example. The combination can be very, very tough. Usually those children are very confident. They can be extremely stubborn. They may want to be leaders. And sometimes they can be more aggressive, especially if the fire element is stronger in the chart. They can be more aggressive, and they also like to feel like they are doing something meaningful. So, for example, if you find a way to include them in the family work or something which will make them feel important, it would be very, very positive for them. They don't forgive easily, usually, but they can be hardworking and consistent. Okay, if the earth element is stronger, sometimes they may close themselves, they may shut down. For example, if you hurt them, if you insult them, if the fire element is stronger, they may become aggressive or they may react openly. But if the earth element is the one which is stronger, they may take things personally on an inner level and they may shut down. So, yeah, this is also an interesting combination. And another thing is that usually they think that they are always right. So it's difficult to convince them to, to shift their perspective. They have their own idea. They don't listen to others so much. And they're conservative, so they want to stick to the routine stuff, so they don't accept opinion from others so easily, and they don't want to make those changes, especially if the change is coming from the outside. If someone is trying to control them, it's very unpleasant for them. Now the next combination that we have is water and air. Water and air are also different type of elements. The air is very open, extroverted, male polarity, and the water is introverted, passive, and female polarity sign. So from one side, we have a contradiction as well, but usually both of those elements are soft. So the child can be very soft, sometimes can hesitate a lot, can be shy, may need some encouragement from the parent, and also may not complete the things that he starts. They respond a lot to the outer circumstances, to the environment, and to what other people think about them or what they do. So again, the example and the environment is very, very important. Their moods are also shifting usually. And yeah, we said that they react strongly to the environment. At the same time, sometimes they might be very magnetic. So they can be very kind. They know how to communicate. The water element increases their sensitivity, their intuition as well. They are, feeling, they're sensing other people. And on the other hand, the air element allows them to express things and to be capable of, saying the right things. So sometimes they may also be pleasers. So they want to make other people happy. Okay, the next combination that we have, air and earth. Now, what if you're a child or you have this combination, air and earth? First of all, this is very good for materializing your ideas. Those people, those children can be practical. They can apply their knowledge, their skills are usually practical. And they're paying more attention also to the outer circumstances, to the environment. The positive about this combination is also that the air element may help the earth element with more positive attitude, with more optimism, because sometimes people and children with a strong earth element, they might be more pessimistic. On the other hand, the air element can bring more lightness here and can make things, easier. So sometimes, yeah, this can also be a great combination. Those children or those people can also organize things and can manage things very well. They are rational, they are concrete, they are logical. So, yeah, I think that these are the most important things about this combination. So, I would say one of the definitely not a difficult combination. There is some kind of contradiction because of the different polarities of the elements, but at the same time, I think that they can both bring something which is missing for the other element. So the earth element can make the air more consistent, more logical, more patient, and the air element brings to the earth more lightness and more optimism. So usually this is a nice combination. Okay, and we have the last combination, water and earth. This also happens to be my own personal combination, and generally this is considered to be the most difficult. Water and earth, even though the elements are in harmony because they are both female polarity signs, they're both passive and introverted, so there is not a conflict here, so that's not the problem. The problem is that it might become too much. So the child or the person might be too closed, can be too sensitive. Those children, they remember things for a very long time. They don't, there is not enough lightness usually. They can dramatize things, not in the way that the fire-water combination will do that, but in a more personal way, more introverted way. They need more love. That's the truth, that those children, they need more attention, they need more patience. And sometimes these are the people who are more predisposed to depression or sadness or those type of, negative thoughts or attitude. So if your child has this combination, water and earth as dominant elements, he definitely needs more attention. And I would say that here the more difficult case is if the earth is stronger than the water. This is the more difficult combination because the water makes the person or the child extremely sensitive, extremely emotional. He, experiences things on a very deep level, and some challenging experiences, or especially if it's about some kind of trauma. On the other hand, the strong earth element fix things or fixate them and keeps them constant, deep within the person. So he may feel like stuck in those negative emotions or challenging memories. So this might be a challenging combination. Of course, it doesn't mean that your child cannot be successful or happy. As I can say that I'm an example of someone who is actually handling with things, even though we all have certain issues, of course, to handle with. But don't be worried if your child has this combination. Just keep in mind that he needs more attention and he might be really sensitive. Okay, so we covered all of the combinations for the child's chart. Now, the next part. So yeah, I think that we are having enough time to cover that as well. So we are keeping everything according to our schedule, guys, which is great. So we are going to talk about how the relationship changes, or what kind of relationship usually the parent and the child have according to the strongest element in their chart. And there are really interesting combinations here, and it's so important. And by knowing this information, you may know things that otherwise you may miss or you may not realize. Because, for example, if you're completely different from your child, which is very often the case, you may not be able actually to understand the possible challenges for your child. So I think that this approach is very, very helpful. And honestly, I think that it applies to all kinds of relationships, not only for child-parent relationship, but as we said, this is the type of relationship which usually is kind of something which we cannot change. When I say that we cannot change, I mean that you cannot find another child or another parent. So you have to learn to understand them in a way. So the first combination that we have, fire elements. So what's the typical relationship if the parent and the child both have fire as a dominant element? First of all, of course, there might be an understanding because you share the same values. You both value leadership and activity and independence, but the experience or the practice shows that this combination can also be challenging because both of the participants, so the child and the parent, they may both want to be the leader. And this can bring confrontation. So usually this type of relationship is very dynamic, very active. Children with strong fire element, they don't take orders easily or instructions. On the other hand, the fire parent wants to navigate, wants to control the situation. So it might become, kind of a challenge. Usually those children, they want to start their own independent life earlier, and the parent sometimes may not accept this easily because he wants to control the situation. And of course, most of the parents, they have the best intentions. They want to do the best for their children, but in this way, the child may feel suppressed. So if you have this combination, if you're a fire parent and the child is a fire child, you have to respect his right, and you have to allow him to make his own decisions, even make his own mistakes. We all have to, go through that. Let's see. One thing which can be very helpful for this relationship is finding something which you both enjoy doing, whether this would be some kind of sport or some kind of creative activity, or anything which includes taking action where you are both participating. This can be very, very helpful for this type of relationship. Now, the next combination that we have is a fire child and an air parent. So the child is very active, he's very independent, he wants to do things on his own. At the same time, the heir parent doesn't have so much energy. Usually these are the cases when at some point, the parent just gives up and says, well, let him do whatever he wants, I cannot handle it. So sometimes those parents may feel overwhelmed because, the child has lots of energy. He takes, he wants to do many things. And the parent just, wants some time for himself. So this might be the challenge here. At the same time, the parent may also have lack of focus, and this might be very disturbing for the child. So he may not like that. For example, the parent sometimes doesn't follow his promises or changes his behavior. So this might be something disturbing for the child. And typically in this case, also the child may try to be the leader or even to be the parent in this relationship. Okay, and the best advice in this type of relationship is, first of all, to respect your child and to try to build up a relationship where you're both equally, well, not important, but you're deciding as equals what will happen. So don't try to control this child, because it won't be easy and it won't be helpful for the relationship. Okay, so what if we have the opposite combination? If the child has a dominant air element and the parent has a dominant fire element. Um, in this situation, the parent is controlling the situation more. He is trying to navigate the child. At the same time, the child doesn't confront so much the parent. He might take this pleaser role where he's trying to do what the parent says only to make him happy, or also he promises something and he doesn't keep it, the child, I mean, which might be disturbing for the parent. Also, the parent may see the child as really um, superficial or inconsistent, which might be very annoying. Yeah, also, as we said, typically those children don't try or don't want to confront the parent. So this is one of those combinations when the parent is more likely to be in the leading role. And what I think is important is that the parent should be very conscious of how he communicates with the child, and to really try to control his temper. So if you have lots of fire energy in your chart as a dominant element, I mean, if the fire is dominant, or maybe your Mars is very, very strong, or, there is something else which is making you very impulsive and, sometimes even aggressive. If the child doesn't have the same energy, keep in mind that you may hurt him without wanting to do that, without realizing that. So that's my advice, to be very, very conscious and very careful, and to understand that the other person may not be as strong as you are. So, yeah, always something to be careful with. Okay, our next combination: fire child and a water parent. For the parent, this might be sometimes very difficult because the child is very independent. The child wants to be the leader. Again, he may try to be the parent in the relationship. At the same time, parents with a very strong water in their chart, they may have lots of worries. They may have their own fears. They may try to protect their child. But if your child is a fire child, he may not like that at all. Actually, it's almost for sure that he won't accept that. And this may bring lots of struggles and issues for the relationship. So the communication should be on a more positive level. So don't try to project your own fears and worries to your child, and just allow him to be more independent and to make his own decisions. Okay. Yeah, also respect the privacy of your child. Allow him to, have his own stuff. Don't try to know everything about him. Usually, when the parents have many worries, especially if they have lots of water in their chart, they think that if they know everything about their child, they will protect him, or they will know if there is a problem. But if the child has a strong fire element, he won't respond well to that. And actually, you may provoke him to prove that you are wrong, and to punish you in some way. So respect his privacy. And I think that here, what's the most important generally about any relationship, but also the child parent relationship, is that first of all, we have to know ourselves very, very well, and to know our strengths and our weaknesses. And if you realize that you are one of those people who worry a lot, who, maybe are more negative or pessimistic, or you think that something bad might happen always, keep in mind that you're not helping your child if you're constantly projecting that. And actually, your child might be open-minded, might be willing to have his own experiences. So don't suppress him, because if the child has a strong fire element in the chart, he won't follow your directions, and you may push him to leave the family really early, or to make a step which is not healthy for you. Especially in the previous generations, but I guess that nowadays it happens as well. When, for example, if a girl feels really suppressed by her parents, one of the steps that this girl has made was to get married really young. Nowadays, yeah, maybe it also happens, but that's kind of a way for the girl to escape the protection or the controlling situation. So, yeah, one thing to be aware of. And one advice for this relationship, fire child and water parent, is to ask for help. The parent should ask the child to help him. If you find a constructive direction for this energy that your child has, actually, you may really improve the relationship. And usually, if the relationship is balanced, when the children grow up, they usually take care of their parents. They can be very caring. Okay, so what if we have the opposite combination? Water child and a fire parent. Again, the parent is more controlling, meaning that he wants to be the leader. And this is one of those combinations where you have to be extra careful. I already said a few words about that, but let me repeat it again. If you have a very strong fire element, you're too direct, you are sometimes maybe brutally honest, and if your child is too sensitive, it may really hurt him. So you have to be especially careful with this combination. So, for example, if your child hesitates or maybe needs more time, allow him the time that he needs. Don't do his work for him. A very typical case, a mother with a strong fire energy. If the child has a strong water or strong earth element in the chart, these are one of those mothers who, want to tie the shoes of their children, even if they're really grown up now. Really grown up, I mean like 4 or 5, 6 years old, only because they don't want to wait them, because they are getting nervous and annoyed if the child needs more time. And here you have to work with yourself. I mean, you have to be more conscious and just try to be more patient with your child, because in this way you are not letting him to learn. You're not giving him the time that he needs. Okay. Also, these are the cases when, as we said, the parent can be really annoyed if the child is slow. So just accept that your child might be really different from what you are, and you have to respect him, and you have to be very careful, especially with this combination. Okay. One thing that the parent may help the child in this case is with more encouragement. Water children, very often they can be shy, they may hesitate, or their self-esteem is not so strong, which usually is something, which is typical for the fire element. I mean, strong self-esteem and confidence and those things. So the parent may really encourage the child. And water children, they usually need this encouragement. So, when your child is making something nice or something right, encourage him. Don't neglect his achievements. Now, the next combination that we have is a fire child and an earth parent. Okay, so let me see how many more combinations we have. Okay, so guys, I think that we can cover two of the other combinations now about the fire and the earth element. And I think that we can leave the others for tomorrow because we won't have enough time. But I promise that we will cover everything that we are supposed to. So I will talk about now the fire and the earth element combinations. Meanwhile, if you have any questions or maybe some kind of comments, or you want to share something or ask something, you can do that. So what if the child has a strong fire energy and the parent has a strong earth energy in the chart? This is one of those combinations when the child may look really impulsive for the parent. The parent usually needs more time. He likes things to be strict. He likes to, put some kind of order. And usually the child with a strong fire element doesn't like that. The fire child needs more space, needs more independence, and parents with a strong earth element, they usually want to control things. So sometimes this might be a more problematic combination. Also, the earth parents may try to may not try but may criticize more their children, and this is something which the fire doesn't really like. So yeah, basically, if the parent is conservative, this is what can bring the challenges. If the parent is not so conservative and allows the child to make his own steps, this might be a much easier relationship. Sometimes also the emotional connection may not be so strong between those two elements. Not always, of course, but you may need to work more on that. Okay. Yeah, and one thing which is very important for this combination is to show respect. If your child has a strong fire element, you have to show him that you respect him, that you appreciate him, and you have to provide space for him. Okay, so what if we have the other combination? If the child has a strong earth element and the parent has a strong fire element. In this case, the parent might be really annoyed in the cases when the child is slow or needs more time or needs more patience. Usually the earth children, they need time and patience. And the fire is so impulsive, so direct that, the parent might be very, very impatient in this case. So of course, the parent is the one who has to be more conscious of the situation, who needs to make the changes. So again, work with yourself and try to be as supportive as you can. Earth children, very often they also need more support than other children, perhaps together with the water element as well. Okay, so again, the parent needs to encourage more the child, to support him and bring more optimism, because the earth element sometimes might be more pessimistic. So encourage the child, show him the positives, show him his skills and how he's handling with things. Really appreciate everything that he achieves on his own, and just, allow him to learn. Don't push him. Don't expect him to be a grown up when he's just a child. Yeah. And generally, this is one of those combinations which may be very positive when the child is a grown up. Usually this is also one of those, they're both oriented on concrete stuff. Of course, the fire is more about the action, the earth element is more about the material form, but they may find a way to communicate constructively. Okay, so let me write down. So the next thing that we have to talk about is air. So tomorrow we are going to cover the other element combinations, as we said, guys. So basically we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 combinations. Actually 7, 8. Okay, 8 or 9, I'm not sure. Okay, tomorrow we are going to finish that. We are going to talk about all of the combinations. Plus we have the moon signs and how they affect the emotional needs of your child. One of the most important topics, because children are strongly influenced by their moon sign. Also, we are going to talk about the different aspects of the moon with the other planets and how it changes the relationship with the mother, the emotionality of your child. And I will share with you a very interesting psychological approach or psychological theory about the different emotional needs, the different emotional expressions, actually, the different expressions of love, and how we all may have different needs. So it's really interesting. So I don't see any questions now. But of course, you may ask your questions tomorrow. I know that many people will watch later, so that's okay. Thank you everyone for joining me today. Tomorrow at the same time, we are going to continue with our topic. So if you have some questions, of course, you may ask them tomorrow. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad that you like it. I know that this is a lot of information, and maybe it might be, like too much, but trust me that this is the basics of astrology. If you remember those things, it will be extremely helpful whenever you want to interpret any chart or understand the relationship better, or understand your own relationship with your own child. But even if you're not a parent, it's still extremely helpful. And again, I would like to repeat how important it is to start from the general stuff. Um, I think that many of us, when we start to learn astrology and we try to understand this aspect or this position, for example, we see that, let's say, we have a square between Venus and Uranus, for example, and we try to interpret that aspect on its own. But the same aspect may have a different impact depending on the whole chart. I mean, the general tendencies for the chart. So always start your interpretation from the more general stuff, which are about the dominant element of the chart, the element combinations. There are other stuff as well, but this is a great starting point. Okay, Marina asks, what if she has a sun squaring Saturn and her father has the same? You have the same topic to work with. Usually the sun squaring Saturn makes the relationship between the father and the child more distant in some way. Sometimes the father is literally not part of the life of the child. Like, for example, the parents are separated, not always, of course, but usually there is an emotional barrier between the child and the father. And also very typical is that the father might be very demanding, very strict. There might be lots of rules. So in some way, you are both facing with the same situation. And it means that your father hasn't worked so much with this energy. And in some way, you are continuing the same model. So it would be interesting if you have a child, whether he will have any aspect between the Sun and Saturn, not only the square, but any aspect would be interesting as well. Okay. So I think that we've covered a lot of stuff. Tomorrow we will continue with the other indications that we have. So I really hope that it's helpful for you. And if you have other questions, we can cover them tomorrow. So have a nice Saturday, and I'll see you tomorrow at the same time.